Hello and welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning. I am your host, Tony Gerdeman. The Indiana game is in 87 days, the game against Michigan in 171 days. I want to welcome in Kevin Noon for the second day in a row, back by popular demand. Kevin is back. We are here to talk some Ohio State football while Tom Orr still on vacation, a second day on vacation. It's getting to be unbelievable. Kevin, how are you doing?
Doing well. Probably not as well as Tom, as he is in wherever parts unknown right now, sunning and funning and everything else. But we'll hold down the fort, and maybe he won't come back.
That is right. Tom is vacationing in parts unknown, where the bad wrestlers come from. He's on a pilgrimage to see a bunch of evil wrestling birthplaces, and he'll come back and tell us, this is where the Undertaker he grew up. This is where Mankind is from. Back then, he was known as Little Cactus Jack. So I look forward to all of the stories from Tom when he gets back. So yesterday, if you didn't catch it, yesterday's show, we did some over-unders on the Buckeyes this year. Today's show is a similar bent. I want to ask Kevin to just give us his thoughts on some comparing, some contrasting that I've got going on here. And my first one for you, Kevin, is who has more starts this season, Cameron Martinez or Jihad Carter?
Yeah. Since you gave me about 1 minute notice that I was coming on the show, I haven't really gone through and done my this or that preparation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say I'm going to dance with the known and not with the unknown. I'm going to say Cameron Martinez, just because he knows the system. I think that he had, I think that he has the trust of the coaches already, and he has, he just has the experience. So, and we saw Jihad Carter get banged up during a practice, and he was, bounced back fine and everything else. But I like Cam Martinez on that one.
Yeah, Cam Martinez had a fantastic spring, was making plays there as the nickel. They went into the portal to get Jihad Carter from Syracuse to help out, presumably with that nickel, but he can play any of the safety spots. He was the number 2 nickel for the Buckeyes this spring until he went down. And depending on who you talk to, obviously there are some people who remember the struggles that Cam Martinez had last year in a handful of games, the Michigan game, and are hoping that Jihad Carter can win that job. But if the Cam Martinez that we saw this spring is the Cam Martinez that we saw or that we see this fall that is the Cam Martinez we saw in the spring, I think people will be pleasantly surprised. But I think I'm with you at this point until I see otherwise. I would go with Cam Martinez as well. Now, Kevin, here's an interesting one. Not that they aren't all interesting, because they are, but who has more tackles for loss this season? Steel Chambers or CJ Hicks?
I think that the question leads itself to say Steel Chambers, just because we can kind of pencil Steel Chambers in to play in every game, but Chambers' position may not lend itself to as many TFLs as what CJ Hicks would be doing. So it's kind of a case of, you got the one guy who's got the edge on how many snaps he's probably going to see versus the other guy whose position would allow him a little bit more range and ability to go out and do some of these things. Um, you're killing me, Smalls. You're killing me. I'm going to say Steel Chambers, because I think you need to be on the field to have the opportunity to do that. And that's not a case of me saying that I don't expect to see CJ Hicks out there a great deal, but I think that just knowing that that Chambers is going to be your everyday starter more than likely, unless something happens, and he's going to see 3/4 of action in a lot of the games. He'll see 4/4 of action probably in a few of the games. I just, I like the person who gets as many at bats as possible to score more hits.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and that's why it's interesting to me because this is Steel Chambers is there every down and has a certain job to do. CJ Hicks, when he's going to be in there as say the jack, his job is going to be a little bit different. His job is going to be getting into the backfield. And so he won't have nearly as many snaps, but what he's being asked to do should lend itself to more tackles for or 2 tackles for loss. But will it lend itself to as many as Steel Chambers? Now, I'll tell you, Steel Chambers had 6.5 last year. Do you think CJ Hicks can hit 7 this year?
If given the opportunity, yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, we're basing this on very incomplete information. We've not seen him in this role against an opposing team, how
Mhm.
teams are going to try and account for him. But I think that just based on some of the games on the schedule and the amount of playing time that I would expect him to get, I mean, we're saying that he's got to average about half a TFL per game. Um, I think 7 is very doable. Now, I think if you put it at 8, and I know that over unders was yesterday's show, but if you put the over under at 7.5 or 8, I might be inclined to take the under. I think we're kind of right at the mark of where I would expect, just with so much incomplete data.
I also think the second year in the system for Steel Chambers could lead to a big season in the backfield for him. I think I'll go Steel Chambers there as well. I think there's a chance it could be pretty close. It wouldn't surprise me to see CJ Hicks come out of nowhere with like 4 tackles for loss in the first 2 games or 6 in the first 3 as offenses adjust to whatever it is Jim Knowles is doing. Let's stick with with getting into the backfield. Who has more sacks this year? JT Tuimoloau, who had 4 sacks last year, or Jack Sawyer, who had 4.5 sacks last year while also moonlighting as the team's Jack?
Once again, we're dealing with a situation of where we have incomplete data. We don't know what Jack Sawyer looks like as an actual straight up defensive end. I mean, he was the jack. I mean, he was doing this, that, and the other. Um, does his presence on the field force the defense to have to account for him more and free up JT Tuimoloau? Does JT Tuimoloau's presence free up Jack Sawyer? Um, I think that in a lot of ways, I mean, I think based on just hype and production coming in, even though that JT was the higher regarded recruit in a lot of people's eyes, um, the people are going to sit there and view what it is that Jack has. But I think that JT being like the bigger guy, and there's something to be said about being, if you're a little quicker and smaller or whatever. I mean, not that anybody who sees Jack Sawyer's like, oh, what's up, shrimp? That's never going to be the case. But I think that I think I'm really buying JT this year. I really think JT, not JTT, JT is going to have a pretty substantial year, but I think that Jack will as well. But when we're looking at just the numbers and everything else, I think that while I don't expect there to be a lot of those Penn State games in there for JT, I think that we saw what what his potential could be, and I think he's going to unlock a little bit more of that going into this year. Whereas with Jack, we still have to kind of see what that looks like in his old position as he moves to a more natural role.
It is interesting that we saw what JT Tuimoloau is capable of, but based on what he did last year, that game against Penn State is a complete outlier. So you have this interesting thing of this is what he can do, but he only had sacks in 3 games last year, and that's not good enough. And Jack Sawyer had sacks in 4 games last year. Is that good enough? No. I mean, it's you'd expect more production out of them. However, you also have the fact that whenever anybody is facing Ohio State's defense, they're trying to get rid of the ball as quickly as possible. The correct answer here, Kevin, is that they will have 0 sacks each, and Mike Hall will have about 36, and Tyler Williams will have about 15. So that's unfortunate for the defensive ends, fortunate for the defensive tackles for the Buckeyes there.
So you heard it here first. Bet the over on 50 plus sacks for Ohio State this season, just based on based on my rudimentary math skills there from what Tony's spouting.
Very rudimentary, but very correct. They had 34 last year. Time to get up there into the 51 area just from 2 defensive tackles. It's going to be spectacular. Next one, Kevin. Now you got to put your thinking cap on for this one. Who has more? Mitchell Melton tackles for loss or freshman wide receiver touchdown catches?
Well, we're talking about a player who got hurt last year, and we really have not seen him in that role at all.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with freshman wide receiver, is this freshman and redshirt freshman?
True freshman.
True freshman. Okay, so that takes a Kojo Antwi or a Keon Grays out of the equation. Not that I necessarily know if that is going to be hugely significant in the numbers. Let me work backwards on this. Let me start from the offensive side and work my way back, because I think I know more about the offense than I do about the defense with Mitchell Melton, since that's still kind of an unknown. Everybody pretty much assumes it's going to be the Marv and Emeka show, and then Julian and maybe Jaden Ballard. But I think there is going to be some opportunity for the young guys later-ish in games. I mean, I think that, when in the Western Kentucky or Youngstown State or Rutgers games, I don't think that there's going to be bringing in the number 2 quarterback and throwing the ball all over the field. But at some point, I would really like to see Ohio State learn a lesson of, you should probably get the number 2 running the real offense a few times, even if it's with the second string. So again, I think if we sit there and we look at that, how do we extrapolate how many wide receiver touchdowns from true freshmen might there be? I mean, Carnell Tate obviously lost his black stripe. He's just too talented to keep off the field. But then again, how do you figure it out? We talked to Brian Hartline about running 10 personnel and having 4 wideouts there, and that isn't necessarily of what they're made of. So, I would probably put that number at under half a dozen for sure, is in my opinion. Now, for Mitchell Melton having TFLs, I mean, he's playing a position where you would hope to see some TFL numbers, and he could come out and have a game of where he could put up 2.5 in a game, and then you're already. And if you're saying 6, let's just say half a dozen truly is 6 on the other side. I mean, you're almost halfway home. I think whenever you have a bet against the offense and defense for Ohio State, I always got to take the offense, just because it is the more known quantity. It is Ryan Day is an offensive coach, and that's just kind of where the stars have been. And I know that I know that the Melton family is keep an eye on Buckeye Huddle. So if they're watching, hello. And I really, I'm a big fan of your son, but I think that based on just this specific question, I'm gonna take freshman receivers.
It's a very unique freshman class of receivers, very talented class. I will say they've had talented classes in the past. No true freshman touchdown catches last year from the receivers. 4 the year before from Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka. 1 in 2020 from Jackson Smith and Jigba. Then in 2019, 5 from Garrett Wilson, 1 from Jamison Williams, so 6 total. 2018, 3 total from Chris Olave. So 6 has been the high water mark. I think that's probably it still feels high for a group of freshman wide receivers.
I think it might be a little bit of a reach, but they're really talented.
They are, and you factor in the way they can get the ball to them. Brandon Ennis, Noah Rogers. We don't even talk about Bryson Rogers enough. Of course, Carnell Tate. I feel like, can Mitchell Melton get 7.5, 8.5 tackles for loss? I think that might be what it may take, because it wouldn't surprise me to see Carnell Tate have a 2 touchdown game at some point, and same with Brandon Ennis against a nobody team type of thing where they just have a big game and it jumps their numbers up. However, I I'm going to go with Mitchell Melton on this one because let's not upset the Meltons. Here's one that I don't know if you're going to get correct. Who will have more Furl Mangus? Who will have more interceptions this year? The Ohio State cornerbacks or the Ohio State quarterbacks?
Ooh. That's a good question. Of course, you came up with these. They came out of that noggin there. I mean, let's work our way backwards and start with the offense. We are talking about a quarterback in, let's just say it's going to be Kyle McCord, who's played, he had one start and he's had some mop-up time. I think Ohio State at first is going to do some things to try and put Kyle in positive situations where he's not going to be throwing into a ton of traffic. I think the defenses are really going to try and ball hawk, though, knowing that Ohio State has an inexperienced quarterback. And then let's not forget that if, going back to the previous question, if they're going to be trying to throw it a little bit with the twos, you have a situation of where you can rack up some interceptions there potentially. I mean, didn't Kyle throw a pick in the Akron game, if I remember right? So, I mean, that's certainly there. I think really what the question comes down to is on the defensive side is just how much success the corners have at picking the ball off. And, I guess I'll ask for a clarification. There are going to be times that Ohio State's going to be running a corner out there at nickel as opposed to a safety. Now, is a corner and is a nickel a corner in that situation, or is a nickel? And am I going to get that because you're going to be dealing with 5 DBs and 2 of them are designated as corners and 2 of them certainly are safeties, and then you're going to have a nickel that could be populated with one or the other.
I think if they normally play corner, then they're a corner, and if they show up at nickel at some point, they can still count for the corner interception. I will say, however, do you know the last time a cornerback at Ohio State had an interception?
No, I was gonna ask to phone a friend or get some sort of lifeline there because I had a feeling that this was coming.
I believe, and I'm looking right now, I believe it was Penn State, October 30th of 2021. No cornerback interceptions at all last year for the Buckeyes. It was a point of contention. Of course, 5 different guys started at corner last year. They dealt with all kinds of injuries. They will be quicker and more on point this year. I think for me, though, not to give you the answer, I think you got to go with the quarterbacks.
Quarterbacks is what I was. Yeah, I wanted to try and get it in before I was accused of copying off your paper.
And it may not. I mean, if Kyle McCord throws 7 interceptions this year, I don't think that's an outrageous number. That's probably, it might even be a little bit low, but he'll be in that range.
He throws 42 touchdowns and 7 picks. I mean, that's still 6-1.
Yeah, and if the corners are as good as they could be, it's not outrageous to think that they could get to that number. I think the safe bet is the quarterbacks in this one, though. One last one for me, for you. Who rushes for more yards this year? TreVeyon Henderson or Miyan Williams? And I already see you reacting.
Oh, geez. I mean, you got a 5. On the surface, you have a 5-headed monster at running back. Let's just sit there and say that, they find some exotic things maybe for Evan to do. You kind of peel Dallin out of there a little bit, but you got to feed the rock to Dallin. I mean, even, these young guys may sit there and say, well, 3 of these backs are going to be gone after this year, more than likely, potentially. So there's going to be opportunity there, and then you take Chip's carries out of there. Now we're, now it's TreVeyon and Miyan. And I think TreVeyon is probably the back that is much more capable of breaking off that 160-yard game. I think Miyan is much more of a plugger. I think that you kind of know what you're going to get there. He's not going to run away from you that much. I mean, he's going to run away from linemen, but he's not going to run away from the secondary. Once he gets into the 3rd level, I mean, he better have angles and blockers and stuff because he doesn't have that home run speed. And trust me, I know about that. I don't even have ground out speed, but I think that And both of them have been dealing with injuries and have been susceptible to some things along the way. So I think in some ways luck is going to play out with it just as much as anything. But I think just the ability of TreVeyon to hit that 60-yarder and some things along those lines. I'm going to say TreVeyon.
I think this is a tough one because there's so many different factors, and even if you give them both 150 carries, I still wouldn't know who is going to come out on top of that because, like you said, you know what you're going to get with Miyan. What you're not normally going to get with Miyan is like a 5-yard loss, which you can get with TreVeyon, but you can also get that 75-yarder from TreVeyon. And, we still have seen Miyan go 60 yards and things like that. But the way they get their yards, I think, is a little bit different. But ultimately, I don't even know who would get more with 150 carries. I think we can expect both of them to average over 6 yards a carry this year, provided the offensive line is there and the quarterback plays well. But going to be a fun one to watch all season long. And didn't even get a chance to get into those two against, say, Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. It's kind of those guys I expect to get the Michigan running backs to have more opportunities in total because that's the way their offense is designed.
They have to get more carries because while J.J. McCarthy may be the more well-known brand name in terms of Big Ten quarterbacks, I think that anybody that really watches will sit there and say, well, J.J. gets it for guts and for running and some of these other things. And Michigan is going to probably – how many more attempts a game is Michigan going to have running the ball than Ohio State? 12, 15 more? I mean, I think it's just based on what the offense is.
Yeah. Yeah, I do expect Michigan to have more attempts. So that will do it for us here today. I want to always invite you to BuckeyeHuddle.com, become a member. Ohio State camps start on Thursday. We'll have a preview show tomorrow for what you can expect, who we're going to see, the top prospects that are going to be there, and what we're going to be watching for. So look forward to that. You can always find us here at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. If you've not yet subscribed, go ahead and do that. Hit the bell to be notified. Give this video a thumbs up if you're watching it. And, of course, you can find us on Facebook as well. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. Sorry this show went a little bit long. We like to give you more than Tom does. So our bad. Anyway, thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.